Hey everyone. Today, I wanted to explore a couple things that people have been asking online. One of them is to focus on the regular waveforms a bit, and then maybe kind of go through the different filter types. And also, one thing that I missed when I was giving a tour of gain structures in my first video is to route the digital former before the analog filter and then use the gain parameters and drive parameters there to help further drive into the analog filter. That was a good question. And maybe if we get some time, we'll bump into a couple other neat things that I found. So anyway, thanks for watching, and let's start out how we normally do. I'll initialize a patch. And we'll go to waveform. So when you start off here in waveform mode, you start with a sort of typical sawtooth. If we switch through them, there's a sine wave. There's triangle. Square. I'm going to actually drop the semitones so we can get a little deeper here. Pink noise. White noise. Let's go back to sawtooth. Up the semitones a little bit. Don't need to go that deep. All right. Cool. So once you've picked your waveform, there's a warp parameter that's fun, and it basically morphs the shape into something else. In this case, what you get is you start with what's basically a sawtooth, and then you can warp this, and it turns very much into a square. You can go backwards and on itself. So let's actually start from scratch. And let's go through an entire warp sort of range. So let's go down. Very cool. Obviously, if applying modulation, you can have some fun with things like that. Let's do that. Let's see. Actually, let me do that differently. Mod. Source. There we go. So pretty nice sound, actually, when you get a little bit of movement in there. One could probably have some fun throwing the complex modulator on there, be a little bit less predictable in the way it moves around than something like a sine, which is what we have signed right now. But I'm going to save the complex modulator for another video. In any case, it's good fun. One thing that I've commented on, and there were some arguments even about online, and it's something that I filed as a feature request to Waldorf, is I find it really unfortunate that when I'm looking at this waveform and I've sent an LFO to modulate this warp function, that while when I turn it here, I can see it change on the screen, when I do it through the modulation routing, nothing changes. And I think this is missing something, because if I'm looking at this, I have no visual indicators of what's happening. And I don't see either the warp being modulated on the screen via its parameter right here. I don't know if you can see that, but via its indicator. And I don't see any change happen to the waveform. And it creates a disconnect between what can be very complex modulation routings and the information, right? And if I'm listening to that modulating, and it is, and now I start messing with this, what I'm saying on the screen isn't actually accurate, right? Because it's also affecting things. And all this is showing is based off what is visually there. So I think they really need to add that as a function, because it gets way too distracting to not have it. You're having to think through all this stuff and the information isn't accurate. I think that their idea was that it would end up too chaotic to have all of this movement and stuff on the screen and whatnot. I think there's a perfect argument for that, maybe in a live scenario especially. But I think that making it an option to turn on or off is actually something that would be really important. Anyway, so we have warp, we have sync. Added a little bit of glide there, but you know. Little filter. Turn that back down. But anyway, you get the idea. Traditional sync sound, super potent. Sounds really good. Then on the other side, there's something called count. And detune. And then a stereo spread. Which I think I'm not hearing, because I don't, we're going to the analog filter. Interesting. So those are your basic controls. So on top of that, let's see. So you got your warp. Well, let me back up here. There are panel controls for a lot of this. So I've been using the screen since that's where the camera is more focused. But you can control a lot of this from knobs very conveniently. So if I switch over to control on the screen, there's this pitch var, which I think is pitch variation, and this is there to somewhat mimic the sound of an analog oscillator by creating a little more fluctuation, a little more movement. And so I don't know if maybe it's hard to tell now that we have other things like detune and this count on. It's a subtle effect, but I think that it does have an impact. You can hear it. Hear the pitch kind of wandering a little bit. And that goes down. So it's just a way to, you know, to bring back a little bit of movement. Huh. Interesting. Looks like I have a bug here that I've run into. I've never seen it before, but it's actually holding that pitch var control. Ah, there, now it's gone. So as far as the oscillator, I think that's kind of where the obvious stuff is. You can add semitones here. You can let me play with this. What am I doing wrong? Let me turn this down. Why am I not hearing that? I have before. Oh, okay, it's the count. So basically, this is sort of where you can take a waveform and you're sort of breaking it up into multiples. And here you can actually, instead of having it all be at the same sort of pitch, you can change it by semitones. So that's what we're hearing here. I knew there was something I was missing. And you can detune it, and it's all sorts of madness. But generally speaking, you know, this is probably one of those things where less is more most of the time, but it is kind of cool functionality. And I'm gonna take that off for right now. Pretty lush sound though. Maybe now's a good chance to address the next thing I wanted to look into. This was something I missed doing when I went over the gain into the analog filter stuff when I was kind of discussing ways to warm things up. One thing we didn't do that I had done before shooting the last video, just didn't think of when I shot the video, was that besides driving things via the saturation option on the filter, keeping your input here hot, or using effects that simulate a drive, or I shouldn't say simulate, but produce a gain or drive function, like in the digital former, like as you can in the effects area. Since you can put the digital former in front of the analog filter, and then you have that same gain adjustment that was kind of uneventful by itself, we should be able to drive into that filter much harder. And so let's do that. Let's go to routing and oscillator 1. Let's go full on into the digital former first. How it works. Okay. So we're going into the digital former. Actually, wait a minute. Oh, wait, sorry. I have to swap the former to filter here. Setting. So now, there we go. That's what I was looking for. So. Okay, so now what we couldn't achieve earlier is totally breaking up everything on the way into the filter, which now with that hard driving, you can hear. I don't know if that's exactly a pleasant sound you're looking for, but it does show that we have been able to increase the drive before the filter, the analog filter. And if we back off almost completely, most of that goes away. So basically right now, all of that crunch is just coming from driving into the analog filter. We could, of course, use the drive function instead of the gain. See, let's do that crunch that was fun last time. It's really kind of, it's kind of one of those things where things just blow up way too much and get kind of noisy. I'm sure that one could find some really interesting pockets in there, but it's easy to kind of overdo it. I wonder, since this is oscillator mix, yeah, that probably wouldn't impact things. That would probably counteract this if we pull it back. Yeah, if you listen to it now, it's lost that. So you've basically pulled back off of what's being driven. The results actually sound better, but we've lost a lot of gain on the output, so my gain structure is all kind of messed up, which is definitely not terribly useful in most cases. I want to go back to the way we had it set before. Turn off the digital former, get some sound again. All right, so we have our main sound. I think we've all heard the basic analog filter quite often. Wait a minute, oops, let me get my routing set up again. Here we go. Okay, now we're pretty much set up where we were before. Routed back to the normal chain. And let's just go through the different analog filter settings. So we have our basic setup. You've heard that a lot in these videos. We have the 12 dB by itself. We have the 24 dB. These are all low pass. Then we have the saturated 12 dB. And then the saturated 24 dB. The next one is the boost mode, which seems to be where the second analog filter is just sort of tracking with the first. to kind of give it a little more oomph. I gotta say, in general, this analog filter has really grown on me. I really like the sound. I really didn't give it enough credit when I first played it at NAMM. Um, it really does have a lot of character, but in ways that don't overcolor everything. It has a nice sound. It definitely takes the digital into a warmer space, but it's somehow clean and transparent enough that it does what it needs to do without making everything sound like the filter, and I'm really liking it. Anyway, let's go on. That was Boost. Now we're in Twin Peaks. Pretty cool. Doesn't really seem to give you much control over the spacing in this one. But it's the two filters. They're resonant peaks slightly separated, and it gives a really nice sound. Let's try the next one. Escaping. Interesting. I don't know if you can see in the video if it's clear enough, but it's like one peak kind of starts moving and the other sort of chases it. And they kind of, the separation changes during the course of that chase. Yeah, they're closer when it's low. And as you open up the filter, the first one sort of gets away from the second, like it's escaping from the second peak. Kind of cool. The next one is Opposition. I like this one quite a bit. You're starting from two different sides. I've really enjoyed that on some pads. Endless. Kind of follow and cycle and go back and forth. Not sure how to explain it, but it has a nice sound. The next one is Independent, which basically now gives you separated controls for both filters. So here's the primary one. I call it that because it's got the bigger knob, but I grab the other cutoff. So they operate just as two completely separate filters. And then Linked. So Linked is kind of cool because you can sort of still decide where the filter is. So you could essentially like decide where both filters are. So the second one, I can bring in close, adjust the resonance, create a peak very similar to what we saw earlier in one of the earlier modes. But I could then change the relationship. So those are the analog filter models. I could go through all the 12 and 24 dB versions for each one of those types, but I think you get the idea. Really cool options, sound really good. It is a little curious, and it has to be said, that they put two of the same filter in there for the analog instead of putting in like a high pass and a low pass, or without giving you the ability to select a high pass. That would have been a whole lot of extra power to be able to add that to one or the other and then play with them. You don't really need it because with the digital former, you have more filter types and they sound fantastic. We're about to get into them. But it is a weird little thing. But it isn't at all a deal breaker. It isn't that you get stuck and just think, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't have that. But it is something, just like the fact that the analog filter is not stereo, that kind of has thrown a lot of us off a bit. And it is interesting, the choices. But they made them, and it's part of what working around limitations can sometimes be part of what creates the character of a synth. No synth has everything, and it's how you get it to do as much as possible with what's there that defines a lot of its character. So let's go back to the basic single mode to make it really simple. I'm just going to open that up. I'm going to pull the resonance down so it's basically fully open. And let's go through the digital former filters. Let's do 2 seconds with the comb. I've played on it before. It's just so cool. I have to give it a spin every time I get close to it. That's the plus, and the comb minus. I have found this really, really useful, both types of comb, when you're using the particle sampling and you've got movement going on. And sometimes if that movement is a little too stiff or something and you just want it to all flow, this comb filter is a way to kind of mesh it all together. It's really fascinating. But what I wanted to focus on today are the analog style filters, or the typical types of filters. Let's go and check out the Nave Low-Pass 24. One thing I gotta say is the Nave, when I think of the Nave, I loved the wavetable and how trippy it was. And I was so excited that that oscillator was going to be in here. But the Nave had a very brittle sound to me, and it does not sound anything like that within the Quantum. It does not tonally sound like the Nave at all. And I think the filter here even sounds warmer than what it does usually if you were to use the plugin. Let's move on to the next. PPG Low-Pass 24. I think they have a kind of warm sound to them. There's a little bit of a darkness to it, and I like it. Let's move on. The Largo Low-Pass 24. They're all low-pass 24 dB filters right now, and so they all have that similarity. But there's definitely a sort of character difference to all three, and I really do like it. I think, though, where it gets more interesting is when we're not in 24 dB low-pass anymore, because now we can get out of what we're stuck with on the analog side. We can get into, let's see. Well, I guess we can go through the 12 dB versions real quick, and then we'll get to what I was just referring to, and that's where we get into the high pass and band pass and notch and things like that. So that's the Nave Low-Pass 12 and the PPG Low-Pass 12. The Largo Low-Pass 12. And now to the Nave High Pass 24. Very smooth, very dense sounding, does not sound digital in any negative sort of way. Let's get to the High Pass 24 from Largo. And then the High Pass 12 from Nave. The Largo High Pass 12. It's got a really smooth sound to it. One thing to note is that the PPG does not have the high pass or any of the other modes, just the low pass. Let's go to the Nave Band Pass 24. The Largo bandpass 24. The Nave bandpass 12. The Largo bandpass 12. The Nave notch 24. The Largo notch 24. The Nave notch 12. So they stay resonant in those modes. The Largo notch 12. Oh, that one's kind of wild. And that's all of the digital former filters. That's all for this particular experiment. Actually, yes, we're gonna call it with that. I have something else to show you. I'm gonna do it in another video, and it'll be good fun. We're gonna experiment a little bit more in another video with the audio input. A friend asked me to run my voice into it and show what that does. And, well, you know what? Why not do it right now? Let's just do it. We'll add a couple minutes to this video. After all that's set up. Okay, we're back to a standard sound. Going to be in particle mode. I'm going to go live granular. Then we need to go to the layer. We covered this in another video. You have to set it there so you get the input. Hello, 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 Let's go in here. Hit particle. I wonder if this will do as I tweak this particle into little grainy cells. I think that's lots of fun. If you're into weird industrial music or experimental music, I think that it's pretty obvious what you can get out of that. It's pretty low latency. There is a little bit of latency, depending on how you set up the parameters and the particle effects. that seems to, at least from it, to become apparently less latent when you have it set like I have now, a short length. But it's interesting and it can get weird. And when you start to think about the possibilities there, it's fun. The sound that I started with when this video started is a sound that I made yesterday that was based on me beatboxing into this mode. And because I was getting some interesting results, I then sampled the input, much like I had with the example of the Moog Model 15 in another video, and then immediately started building this really crazy patch. And it was so quick and easy to turn that beatboxing source into something that you couldn't hear a voice or a beat in. Um, and that's one thing that makes the Quantum so amazing is you can go from 0 to 1,000 in just weird, interesting, moving strangeness. This interface is so fast. Um, it makes it as easy as I could ever imagine it being. Um, so I think they did a really great job. Anyway, so I think I still owe you a video that probably gets more into the complex modulator, probably a tour through the effects. We definitely haven't covered the waveform, or sorry, we did the waveform today. We didn't cover the wavetable area much. So there's definitely more to come. Uh, Thanks for checking this out. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or anything, please post a response in whatever form you're seeing this. And I'll be happy to make another video and address whatever your questions are. Thank you. Bye.